The fluorescent lights of the grocery store hummed a mournful tune. A sound Mark had come to know intimately in the 3.M aisles of his new life. He navigated the sterile brightness with the weary precision of a ghost. The cart held the evidence of his existence. Peanut butter, the kind without chunks because Liam was going through a phase. Apple juice boxes, a frozen pizza, and a single, sad-looking microwave dinner for one. It was a portrait of a life-have. He steered towards the only open lane. The one with the glowing 10 items or less sign that felt like a personal rebuke. His items were few, but his burdens were not. Behind the counter, a young woman, Alara, according to her name tag, was scanning a lonely bottle of wine for a man in a rumpled suit. Her head was bowed, a curtain of dark hair hiding her face. Mark unloaded his groceries. The mundane clatter of his items on the conveyor dealt a stark contrast to the storm in his heart. He missed Sarah with a physical ache, a hollowed-out space beneath his ribs that never warmed. 6 months, and the grief was still a wild animal. Sometimes sleeping, sometimes clawing him open from the inside. "That'll be $28.47, Ilara said. Her voice soft as worn velvet. Mark fumbled for his wallet, his fingers brushing against a small, smooth stone. Liam's lucky rock. He'd forgotten to take it out of his pocket after bedtime. The simple touch of it, a testament to his son's unwavering faith in him, was almost too much to bear. He was failing. He was so tired. He handed her a $50 bill. Their fingers brushed, and that's when he saw it. Her hands, as she took the bill, were trembling violently. It was a fine, persistent tremor, like a leaf in a storm. It wasn't from the cold. The store was overly warm. He looked at her properly for the first time. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with eyes the color of a twilight sky, but shadowed by deep, bruised circles. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the counter for stability, a protective instinct, long dormant, stirred within him. It was the same feeling that surged when Liam skinned his knee. A need to fix, to comfort. "Hey," Mark said, his voice gentler than he'd used in weeks. "Are you okay?" Ilara flinched, her gaze darting up to his before skittering away. "I'm fine, just long shift." But the shaking continued as she made change. It was more than fatigue. It was the tremor of a soul under siege. "I'm sorry," Mark persisted, the words tumbling out. He gestured vaguely at her hands. "It's just, they're shaking pretty bad." For a moment she froze, her body going rigid. Then a single silent tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She looked at him, her gaze now direct and devastatingly raw. "It's the anniversary," she whispered, the words fragile as glass. "Today, 3 years ago today, my husband and our little boy were hit by a drunk driver. On his way back from getting more diapers." "A quick trip," he said. Her voice hitched, a terrible, broken sound. "So every year on this night, my hands, they just remember. They remember holding my son for the last time. They remember the feel of my husband's hand growing cold in mine. The rest of me tries to be normal, but my hands, they won't let me forget." The air vanished from Mark's lungs. The hum of the lights became a roar in his ears. The world, the store, the frozen pizza in his cart, it all dissolved into a meaningless blur. He was staring into a mirror of his own pain, but her reflection was a cavernous, deeper hell. He had lost his wife to a slow, cruel illness. He had time to say goodbye. She had lost everything in a single, violent instant. He was speechless. All the platitudes, the "I'm so sorry's," the "I can't imagines" turned to ash on his tongue. They were worthless. There were no words in any language that could bridge the chasm of her loss. He just stood there. His own change forgotten in his palm, his own grief a suddenly smaller, quieter thing in the face of hers. Ilara wiped her cheek with a trembling wrist and pushed his change across the counter. "Your receipt is in the bag," she said, her voice hollow once more. "Have a good night." The man behind Mark coughed impatiently. The spell was broken. Mark numbly gathered his bags, his mind reeling. He walked out into the cold, pre-dawn air, but he didn't feel it. He felt only the searing heat of her truth. He drove home on autopilot, her words echoing in the silence of the car. My husband and our little boy. A family. Gone. He walked into his dark, quiet house and went straight to Liam's room. His son was sleeping, one arm flung over his head, his breath a soft, steady rhythm. Mark stood in the doorway, watching him, his heart a battlefield of anguish and a strange, dawning gratitude. He had lost his wife, but he still had his son. He still had a reason to buy apple juice and peanut butter without chunks. He pulled the lucky rock from his pocket and placed it gently on Liam's nightstand. Then he went to the kitchen, opened the trash can, and threw his single microwave dinner away. He didn't know her. He would probably never see her again. But her shaking hands had, in a single, devastating moment, steadied something broken inside of him. For a week, Mark was a man possessed. Ilara's face, the tremor in her hands, the hollow sound of her voice, it played on a loop in his mind. He went through the motions with Liam, but his thoughts were 1,000 miles away. Trapped in the fluorescent glow of the 24-hour grocery store, he felt a pull, an inexplicable and profound need to see her again. Not to offer empty condolences, but to what? To thank her? For showing him that his own grief, while vast, was not the only ocean. It made no sense, yet it was the most compelling feeling he'd had since Sarah died. He started driving past the store. Once, twice. On the third night, he saw her car, an old blue sedan, in the employee lot. His heart hammered against his ribs. He was being irrational, possibly creepy. But the pull was magnetic. The following evening, after tucking Liam in with an extra long story, he drove to the store. He had no plan, no script. He just knew he had to stand before her again. He walked in, his palms sweating. There she was, in the same lane, scanning a box of cereal for an elderly woman. Her head was still bowed, her hair a shield. He waited, his pulse a frantic drum in his ears. When the woman left, he approached, his card empty save for one item. She looked up as he reached the counter. The twilight eyes were still shadowed, but there was a flicker of recognition. And then a faint, sad smile. You, she said softly. The man who asked about my hands. Mark's throat was tight. He placed the item on the conveyor belt. It was a small, potted orchid, its delicate purple blooms a stark contrast to the bleakness of their surroundings. I couldn't stop thinking about you, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. What you said? It shattered me, and it put me back together all at once. He took a shaky breath. I lost my wife, Sarah, 6 months ago. Cancer. I thought my world had ended. I come here at 3 a.m. because the silence in my house is too loud. But you showed me that I still have a world. I have my son, Liam. Ilara's eyes glistened. She reached for the orchid, her hands, while still, seemed to carry the memory of their tremor. I'm sorry for your loss, she said, and the words from her held a weight and truth he'd never heard before. I don't know why I'm here, Mark continued, the words pouring out. I had to thank you, and to ask, if maybe when you're finished your shift, I could buy you a cup of coffee. There's a diner down the street that's open all night. No expectations, just two people who understand the quiet hours. He held his breath. It was a monumental risk. He was a stranger, a ghost from the night shift, asking to step into her daylight. Ilara looked at the orchid, then at him. A long, silent moment passed, filled only with the hum of the lights. Then she nodded, a single, decisive movement. My shift ends in 20 minutes, she whispered. I'd like that. Relief, warm and dizzying, flooded Mark's veins. For the first time in 6 months, he felt a flicker of something that wasn't grief. It was hope. A fragile, terrifying, beautiful hope. He paid for the orchid and pushed it back across the counter to her. A gift, he said. For remembering, but maybe also for beginning again? She took it, her fingers brushing the petals with a tenderness that made his heart ache. I'll wait for you by the entrance, he said. His smile feeling foreign and wonderful on his face, he walked away. Light-headed, the world suddenly brimming with color and possibility. He stood by the automatic doors, watching the night. imagining a future where the quiet hours might be filled with conversation instead of silence. Exactly 20 minutes later, he saw her walking towards him. She had taken off her work apron and was holding the orchid pot carefully. She smiled at him, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. And it was like the sun rising after a lifetime of night. Just as she was a few feet away, a cheerful, booming voice cut through the store. "Elara! Hey, wait up. You forgot your lunchbox, you space cadet." A tall, broad-shouldered man in a store manager's polo shirt was jogging towards them, a pink lunchbox in his hand. He was handsome, vibrant, alive. Elara turned, her face lighting up in a way Mark hadn't thought possible. "Oh God, thanks, babe. I'd lose my head if it wasn't screwed on." The man reached her, slung a familiar, comfortable arm around her shoulders, and kissed her temple. "Ready to go home?" "Jake's finally asleep. My mom said he went down like a dream." Mark stood frozen, the world tilting on its axis. Elara laughed, a sound of pure, unburdened joy. "Yes, let's go. I'm exhausted." She then turned back to Mark, her expression shifting to one of polite, distant kindness. "Oh, Mark, this is my husband, Ben. Ben, this is Mark. He's a customer." Ben offered a friendly, firm handshake. "Nice to meet you, man. You picking up some late-night snacks, too?" Mark's hand was limp in Ben's. He couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. He looked from Ben's warm, open face to Elara's, and he saw it then, the subtle shift. The slight, almost imperceptible tightening around her eyes. A silent plea. A warning. The story. The shaking hands. The dead husband and son. It was all a lie. A performance crafted for a lonely, grieving man in the dead of night. The hope that had bloomed in his chest just moments ago curdled, turning into a cold, hard stone that sank to the pit of his stomach. He had offered her his broken heart, and she had handed him a beautiful, intricate fiction. He managed a strangled noise, a vague approximation of a goodbye, and stumbled out into the night alone, the automatic doors hissing shut behind him like a tomb ceiling. The truth was far more heartbreaking than her story had ever been. She wasn't a fellow survivor. She was just a stranger who'd found his pain and for a moment had decided to play a part in it. And he was the fool who had believed her, ready to trade his real, aching grief for her beautiful, phantom sorrow.